I grew up in a small town. It was one of those towns where everybody knew everyone, and all the houses were within walking distance from each other. I never really felt like I lived in fear of anything, but my parents were extremely overprotective when it came to me and my sister. They had these weird rules that we weren't allowed to break, and if we did, they'd ground us for life, and by life, they meant a decade. Now, looking back on it, I get why they were so protective. When I was born, my father was in the army, and my mother was pregnant with my sister. So he left shortly after I was born, and didn't return home until my sister was almost an adult. She would tell me stories about how he would come home from his tours, and she would hide under her bed until he got over his jet lag. And then she said, "Don't worry, once he gets his sleep, he's the best dad ever." Well, he was also extremely traumatized from his time in the army and would have nightmares every single night. He started to drink heavily, and this is what my parents considered to be his coping mechanism, because he could barely hold a job down, much less provide for our family. So my mom decided that she needed to take matters into her own hands and do what she believed was right. That was to raise us by herself and without any help. I don't know where she got this crazy idea that the outside world was just filled with people who wanted to harm us or something, but she had the craziest rules. Like, for example, we weren't allowed to make eye contact with strangers, and if someone did approach us, we had to scream at the top of our lungs. We weren't allowed to play outside by ourselves. My mother had to be with us 24/7. We weren't allowed to use public restrooms. No sleepovers, no school functions, no birthday parties, no nothing. We weren't even allowed to go trick or treating for Halloween. Well, being young and impressionable, we listened to everything she said. But as we got older, things started to get more difficult. For example, one day my sister and I were riding our bikes around the block, and we stopped by a neighbor's house to ask if their kid wanted to come play. Of course, we didn't think that this would be a problem, but when we told our mother about it, she grounded us for 2 weeks. Then the real abuse started. I mean, we weren't abused before, but now things got worse. One night my mom had a nightmare, and she started screaming in her sleep. This always happened, and it was really scary. So I went into her room to try and comfort her. I was only 6 years old at the time. Well, when she opened her eyes and saw me standing there, she freaked out and started screaming at me, saying things like, "Get away from me. You're trying to kill me, and I should have never had kids." Now, obviously, I was really scared, so I ran out of the room crying. Then my dad woke up and started yelling at me, saying that I woke him up and that I was a bad child for doing so. And then he started hitting me. The next morning, my mom took my dad to work, and I stayed home alone with my sister. She felt bad that I got punished the night before, so she brought me some cookies that she baked. I remember sitting there eating them in silence until we heard a knock at the door. At first, I thought that it was our parents, but then we heard the doorbell ring again and again, so I got more and more nervous. And finally, my sister broke the silence and said that we had to check it out. So we walked towards the front door and peeked through the peephole. There was a man dressed in a suit, and he had a name tag that said Bill. It looked like he was in his mid-40s. He had a mustache and a receding hairline, and he was holding a clipboard. I remember thinking how nice his shoes looked. My sister screamed, "Who's there?" And he responded, "Hello, is anyone home? My name is Bill, and I'm here from the Department of Social Services." That's when my sister panicked and ran away while I started crying. Now, I don't know why she reacted that way. Maybe she thought that he was there to take us away from our parents. Whatever the reason, I started to scream for help as loud as I could. He knocked a few more times, and then he left. I didn't see him leave, but I knew that he wouldn't come back. I mean, why would anyone want to come over to our house anyway? And that's when my mom came home and asked what was going on. I told her about the man in the suit, and she called the police. Apparently, he had tried to do this several times, and they had to keep telling him that he was not allowed on our property. She said that he was probably just lost or something, and that we should just forget about it. But I couldn't forget about it. Every single day I would look out the window and watch the street. I was so scared that he would come back and try to break in. And I knew that if he did, my parents would do whatever it took to protect us. Then one day my mom found out that our neighbor had a spare key to our house, and she completely freaked out. She was convinced that he had given that key to Bill, and that he was going to sneak in while we were asleep. So she bought security cameras and alarms. She even put bars on our windows. We weren't even allowed to open them anymore. And if we wanted to let in some fresh air, we had to crawl through the doggy door and sit in the backyard. One night we were having dinner, and my dad suddenly started yelling at my mom. I had never seen them fight before, so I was really scared. My dad said, "That's it. I can't take this anymore. I want to move to a different city. I'm tired of living like this." Then he stormed out the front door and was never seen again. My mom cried for days, and then one night she disappeared too. The only thing that she left behind was a note saying that she went to get some milk, and I'll be right back. But she was gone for 3 whole days. And every time that I went to the window and looked outside, hoping that she would come back, I would see police cars everywhere. They eventually found my mom, and she was admitted to a psychiatric hospital. According to her therapist, she had been suffering from paranoia and anxiety for many years, but it was always kept under control. However, when my dad left, everything just kind of fell apart. It was strange because we received money from both of our parents every single month, but no one ever visited us. The social worker who had come to our house even cut off all ties with us. And the only person that we had left was our neighbor, Bill. One day, I was sitting on the couch watching TV when Bill knocked on the door. I opened it, and he introduced himself again. I was a bit suspicious, but I invited him in. He sat down, and he asked if I wanted to hear some bird calls. I thought that he was just being friendly, so I said yes. He took out his phone and started playing recordings of birds. I still remember the first sound that he played. It was this eerie whistle that lasted for about 10 seconds. And then he moved on to another sound. It was a loud croaking noise that I've never heard before or since. Finally, he played a recording of some screeching and squawking. Those sounds still haunt my nightmares to this very day. He told me that he was hired to investigate if we were being abused, but he never mentioned this during any of his other visits. He then gave me a box of cookies and left. I took one bite out of one of the cookies, and it tasted absolutely horrible. It was like eating a brick of salt. I threw the rest of the cookies in the garbage and noticed that they had no expiration date on them. The next day, I told my mom about it, and she said that he probably poisoned them. I laughed, but then I started to feel sick to my stomach. I remember laying on the floor, crying and screaming. I felt like my stomach was filled with acid. And even though it hurt so much, my mom wouldn't let me go to the hospital. That same night, I remember throwing up on the floor, and then I blacked out. When I woke up, I had a horrible headache, and my mom was sitting next to me saying that she was sorry. I think that she realized that she had taken things too far this time. When I was 18 years old, I moved out of my mom's house. I joined the military, just like my dad. I served several tours overseas, and when I came back, I tried to live as normal of a life as possible. One day, I was driving home from the store when I heard a loud commotion coming from a park. I pulled over to check it out and saw a group of kids gathered around something. As I got closer, I heard one of them say, "Whoa, what the heck is that?" Another kid responded, "I don't know, but we should go tell an adult." That's when I saw it. There was a man lying on the ground making these weird noises. He was covered in scratches, and his face was swollen. I thought that it might be Bill, So I rushed over to him and asked if he was okay. He opened his eyes and said, "Save me," before he blacked out. And that's when I noticed that he had the same receding hairline and the same mustache that I remembered. I flipped him over, and he had scratches all over his neck. I instantly panicked and called 911. The paramedics arrived and started performing mouth-to-nose resuscitation. And I stood there watching, hoping that he would wake up. But he didn't. They loaded his body onto a stretcher, and they asked me if I knew him. I said yes, but I didn't tell them that he was the same Bill that had visited our house. Instead, I made up some BS story about how I knew him from work and that we had gotten into a fight. I didn't want them to know that I had known him when I was a kid. I was afraid that they would think that I was crazy. After the paramedics left, I drove home. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened to Bill. Was he abused as a child, too? Why did he visit us? What was he trying to tell me? I'll never know the answers to those questions. But I do know that whenever I hear a loud croaking sound, I turn around and run.